Finding an accountant for your business or idea is an interesting area. I'm going to cover it today from the point of view of me and how I find my accountant. I'm currently recording this podcast for my listeners working for yourself. It's a podcast designed to help you work for yourself. I've gone through the journey and I'm sharing my ideas. You can get all the information, zulftalks.com. Now, in the past episode, we looked at how to start working for yourself. So we covered things like running a business, national insurance contributions, setting up yourself on the website. This is aimed at UK people, but it can apply to other countries that use similar rules like Australia, New Zealand, and maybe even America. So hopefully this helps you, and I want you to think about these things. It sounds very easy to get an accountant. You simply go out there, search and find an accountant, and okay, yeah, he's my accountant now. But there's a few questions you want to ask yourself before you get to that point. It took me over a month to speak to multiple accountants and check them out before I find one that was better than the rest. It's an unmonitored field, really, so anybody can call themselves an accountant, which is where things get a bit hazy. There is like a governing body out there that looks after this. I'll put all the show notes. You can actually go and check those out to see more details. But I want you to hear this from the point of view of, if you're in this spot, what is the main things you want to think about? So I'm sharing how it proceeded for me. And I ended up getting a half decent accountant. They were better than the rest. And what is it that you need to think about? We'll cover that in a second. Just to give you an update on the podcast. And wait a minute. Wait, I can't pick a moment there, people. A podcast that I've been listening to recently, worth a shout out. And if you're in this field, there's a few things that I regularly listen to, and there are not many podcasts out there that really are helpful. So this is a podcast, Nudge, and it's by Phil Agnew. He's basically a good place to get a lot of useful information around marketing, branding, all the things you need for a small successful business. So this is how his podcast description reads. See if it entices you. Ever noticed how the smallest changes can have the biggest impact? On Nudge, you'll learn simple evidence-backed tips to help you kick bad habits, get a raise, and grow a business. Every bite-sized 20-minute show comes packed with practical advice from admired entrepreneurs. I don't like that word. I can never say it properly. Entrepreneurs and behavioral scientists. See, these words I struggle with. Okay. So Nudge is fast-paced but still insightful with real-world examples that you can apply. This is not your average business podcast. It's over 106 episodes. I've been listening to quite a few of them recently, and I'm finding them very intriguing. It's like from a real point of view, and it's evidence-backed. It makes sense. He actually does stuff and tests it and gives you insight. So definitely check that out. I wanted to mention that because that's what I'm listening to at the moment. And it's always tough to find good podcasts to listen to. So that's giving you a little bit of insight. We are going to be speaking about accountants today, so stay tuned. That will be coming up. And I wanted to cover a few little bits around what I'm learning now. So what am I spending my time on? So if you're joining my journey, I am basically setting up and running my company. It's been a year. And what am I spending my time at the moment on? Let me have a look, because it's always nice to know at what stage I'm at, because I might be a few steps ahead of you or behind you. So currently I'm concentrating a lot with my podcast episodes, kind of building out a regular episode for you to join me on my working for myself journey. Right now, I've been looking a lot around accountants. I've had my year end with my accountant meeting, and that's why it spurred me to make this episode. I've had that meeting. I've spoke to my accountant, and some things they've mentioned there which basically would have been very useful at the start of the journey. And having an accountant, you tend to use them, and they have different services. I'm going to cover that in a later section, so keep tuned for that. They give you different types of benefits. There's different costs involved, and you get different packages. So I've got a package where they basically, whenever I have a question, I can ask them a question, and sometimes you can claim things on like expenses. You can't, all these kind of things. I'll give you an example story later on and how that affected me. But that's the reason I'm working on that now. I'm doing quite a lot on social media sharing. I'm researching better ways of expanding my basically multitasking. So making one piece of content work very well for you. So if you spend an hour making a podcast episode, how can you make that work well automatically? Like, can it become a short? Can you make it into a video? Can you use that as a blog post and have multiple points from that maybe made into a not like a brochure, but like a marketing list? Because I've made a marketing list. You can join, by the way, zulftalks.com. There's a button there to join the newsletter. I'll be sending out tips and snippets of the show. So like, for example, today's episode, there'll be a section there for the top tips when you're thinking about a new accountant. So you'll have a little like a 10-step, maybe not 10-step, 10 points that you need to think about questions. So if you call your accountant, you can just open up the email, look at these and ask them these questions. So that'll be helpful. So I'm making more of these. So that's kind of where I am. Where am I on my journey? That's where I am. I'm experiencing what am I working on in my business. I'm expanding multiple pots. So I want to make sure that there's loads of income for the business, because you never want one source of income. So diversifying. There'll be a later episode about breaking that up. Biggest challenge right now, the biggest challenge for me is going to be, what are we? Challenge is, I like to be very productive with my time. And a big challenge is getting the most from everything that I do, which ties back to multi-using content. So that's a little overview of where we are. And I'm on episode. What episode are we on now? Let me have a look. We've done quite a few episodes, but as part of this series of working for yourself, this is episode 12. So you've joined me on my journey. From before this, we were setting up how to set up working for yourself. We had 6 questions to ask yourself before you set up your company. We had things around the journey. Are you the right type of person to work for yourself? Going back, this is series 11. Is that right? It's series 11. And this is where I'm breaking down more around working for yourself and actually a real life view so you can follow along. Okay, so back to today's topic. Finding an accountant. Yep. This is going to be interesting. Let's share what I did. So firstly, what accountants actually do. So why do you need an accountant? If you're working for yourself, if you're self-employed, which I was, I originally started working for myself from my photography business, which you remember early episodes like 3 or 4, I kind of got excited about photography, started doing online content creation, and that led me onto getting a reasonable income. I made some income from YouTube videos online, from clients paying me to take photographs, and that slowly got above the threshold. So in the UK, if you earn over £1,000 as income, you have to start filling out tax returns, and that's very easy. You go online, you create an account on the DirectGov website, and you can do that yourself. You can have an accountant if you want to, who can do that for you. So it depends how savvy you are with numbers. Having worked in the financial sector for a long period of time in the past, I had like a good handling on numbers. I had spreadsheets that I kept track of expenses, things like that. So I'm not giving you financial advice. This is my journey just to let you know how I progressed. But I'm hoping you find good nuggets of information in this to help you if you're thinking about this. Because there's loads of little misconceptions out there that working for yourself, your own boss, it's like great. But going through this journey, there's quite a lot of things that you have to think about. Like, for example, having too much profit in your company. That can be a thing. You have to start thinking of ways to make sure you're spending money so you don't have to have money sitting there. And there's all sorts of things which we'll cover in a lot more detail in my podcast. So if you're not already following, make sure you're following this podcast and you can get all the information as it comes directly to you. I like to share real view opinions. That's another thing. Accountants speak in a specific accountant way, which I didn't really like. So it took me a lot to get information out from them and kind of put it into my way of thinking. So that's why I'm making this version of that, to help you understand what accountants say, what they actually mean. Because sometimes they'll say in a safe way, but you can read between the lines and understand that, okay, wait a minute. So what you're saying to me is, if I do X, I can't claim it. However, if I claim it in this part, I can. So there's a lot of that in accounting. Like, for example, if you wanted to buy a new jacket for yourself, you can't buy as a business expense. However, if you're a company director, you could put in the trivial benefits part. As long as it meets certain criteria, like it's under £50 and you're not spending it more than 6 times. I'll speak more about these specific examples in the episode, so you got that to look forward to. Now, we're at the bit of what accountants do. So there, I've given you a little bit of information there. You got things like bookkeeping. So bookkeeping is keeping your numbers. How much have you spent? Receipts. What are you doing? A lot of this stuff gets done by software these days anyway. So QuickBooks, if you're using Sage, any type of online Software can do a number of that. However, there are bits about when you spend on your bank card, you have a business bank account. Set up a business bank account if you haven't, if you got a business, because that way you're keeping all your expenses separate from your normal expenses. And that you go into a shop and you're buying, I don't know, stationery for your office. You're buying like 2 new book pads. You need to write notes in your meetings. So you buy book pads, you pay for it on your business card. They give you a receipt. That receipt you take a photograph of on your phone. This is like an example of what actually happens. And then the QuickBooks allocates that into your QuickBooks to say you've got an expense. The bank takes the money. It takes a couple of days for the transaction to actually complete, because you'll notice when you buy something in the shop, it shows up as an actual amount on your like initial purchase on your banking. However, it takes a few days for that to actually pass through the system and show as a transaction. So there's like 2-day wait period there. So imagine you're buying 400 or 500 different things. You can have loads of little transactions that need to be tracked. So then you go into your QuickBooks app and you have to match up the transaction to, okay, on that day I bought this book and this is the receipt. Is that matching? Yes, match, and then save. So this bit you can do yourself if you're small, but as you get bigger, like now I've got a director of a company and there's multiple transactions that take place. And it might make sense for me to have the accountant do the bookkeeping. So they basically handle that. So think of it like a staff member that looks after your section. So if you worked in a finance company, finance department sorts that out basically. Company buys stuff, they do all the invoicing, they do all the stuff, and then the company can use whatever they need to use. That's like a bookkeeping example of what an accountant can do. You can helping you pay the right amount of tax. That's like a big one. So finding better ways of showing you what you need to pay, how you should pay it, what pots to put things in. Oh, okay, you bought a big new computer. Did you know if you buy it between a certain amount, you can put it as a certain transaction and class it as plant machinery, depending on your... Because plant machinery is like a category where you can put big items of purchases, and then those are used as assets of the company. So this is a lot more technical, but they're going to give you information about this, or they're expected to know this. So I'll give you a few questions that you should ask accountants. What I'll do is I'll do a specific one. So I've got my notebook in front of me. Let me write this down so I make sure I do this. Accountant, let me go to that page. Okay, accountant questions. That's my to-do action from this episode. So I'm going to make a list of about 7 or 8 questions. If you're thinking of getting an accountant, if you ask them these questions, it'll give you an idea of how good they are. So I did this when I was looking for an accountant, and out of 20 accountants that I approached, because what I did was find an accountant, but I'm jumping ahead. Let me go back. So what do accountants do? Improving tax efficiency, financial compliance. So are you doing things in the right way? Have you got like requirements of how much money you're making? Are you paying people the right amount of salary? Do you need to have staff members working for you? Do they need to handle the payroll, pay as you earn? Sometimes accountants, good ones, can help you with business plans, sourcing funding for growth, government funding, like give you information about that, tax changing implications, exit planning, and extracting value from your business. Now, there's a lot here to do. A lot of company accountants, because I've come from the financial sector, I'm used to high quality accountants, like, you know, top of their game. And I assumed all accountants would be that good. So as soon as I got my company, I started looking at accountants. I was like, wait a minute, this accountant's just one guy out of his house being an accountant. There's nothing wrong with that. However, say if he's ill or if he's not well, how do I know my deadlines will be met? So there's all these little things that you need to think about. You want something that would be robust for you. So you want, yes, it's difficult to really say, but there's loads of different types of accountants out there, and multiple versions of them do certain aspects. Some will say to you, okay, yeah, we can be your accountant. Once a year, we'll do your tax return. Is that something you want? They might charge you £200-300 just to do that. Like as an example. On the other scale of things, you might have another accountant where they charge you £200-300 a month. So you're paying over like £3,000-ish, £2,500 for a whole year. What they offer you is continual offered support. So if you ever have any questions, you can approach them and ask them questions. You can get tax advice from them. You can have an extra package on top of that. You could pay more than that, £200 a month, and then they do quarterly reviews with you. If you're a company, that would make more sense. It depends how tax efficient you want to be and how much money you're making. But during that stage, they might offer you additional steps. But to get to that kind of level of accountant, I had to do a lot of research to find a half decent one. First, I went on to Google Maps, accountants, local accountants, and I looked at about 10 of them. Some of them I found they didn't even answer. Some of them said they'd call me back, they didn't call me back. Some of them didn't sound like they knew what they were talking about based on the questions I asked them. So, yeah, it's interesting and challenging at times. Coming from an area where accountants are very professional and smart, there's loads out there that will be professional and smart, but finding them is another tricky subject. So it's like with anything, if you have a high expectation based on what you've been used to, then you maybe have to lower your expectations possibly. As long as they get the essentials done, you'll be like, okay, wait a minute, I'm used to this level of accountant that does X, Y, Z, but this is what I can get locally. There's no reason for them to be local. Mines are miles away, somewhere in London, I think. So yeah, I gotta check where they are. But I ended up getting some that are online. So you not online, but like you can do Zoom meetings with them. You can have phone calls. There's actual person there you speak to. You got a dedicated accountant, but it's just you want to set your expectations to the level of service you're gonna get. Because I think financial departments have a big budget for accountancy. So they're paying big dollar for the top of the top, which is why you're getting those excellent accountants. And also they've experienced accountants there that have gone through the years and got better and better. So if you're going to go with the company, you got multiple people there as backups. And that's kind of giving you an idea of what accountants do. And I touched a little bit more there on around like, what I did and how I got there. So what else are we looking at today? Accountants wise, let's go back to my little... Okay, what do I need an accountant? Oh, do I need an accountant for my small business? So we touched on this. If it's a small business, you're self-employed, you can probably do your stuff yourself if you're half decent with numbers and you know the deadlines. That's a good point to be at. So when I started self-employed and moved to a company, which meant, okay, I was able to do that. But if you're not able to do that, then that's something that you need to get an accountant for. Self-employed accountants tend to be cheaper. But again, you'll have to go through this to find out someone. What can an accountant do for my business? So question yourself, okay, when I get an accountant, what can you do for me? And then explain, I do this. And then in your mind, the things I talked about today, are they ticking any of these boxes? Because if they're not, then they're the lower tier accountant based on what is out there. Because the ultimate accountant offers you everything I told you at the starting of this podcast. Finding an actual accountant. So I did the classic thing. I went to Google Maps, found the 10 decent, half decent around me, called half of them, none of them were good enough based on my expectations. I thought, wait a minute, is this the standard? Then I went on to YouTube, I went on to podcasts to find out what else people are using and who they're using. There's not much talked about this really. People just get an accountant, they don't really say, oh yeah, okay, I had expectations, was it good, was it not good? It's just a service they think of. So I went on YouTube, found a few accountants that make YouTube videos about accountancy and they offer services. So there's a few out there in the UK that do offer that. Just be mindful with that. My expectation was the person on the video would be the person I would be talking to, like that'll be my accountant, but no, that's not the case. Yeah, the person in front of the camera, very knowledgeable, very answers all the questions, asks all the questions, makes videos about all the things you would be thinking about getting an accountant, tax returns, dates, should you claim a car in your company, should you buy a house in your company name, should you have a self-employed worker, all these things, like they've got actual videos about them. So I looked into that details. It's an actual company and that person's the face of the company, and then there's a team of people behind him. So then I ended up getting an accountant, which wasn't who I thought it would be. It's just someone in the team. And then that's the classic thing about, is that will he pass his knowledge on to his team? Because in my example, I do a lot of multitasking in my company. If a new member of team came to my company and started off, they'll have to spend at least, I think about 12 years it took me to get to the point where I'm at now. Which in the sense of, how can I show you? Let me reflect that. So reflecting that, me versus an accountant type situation. Accountant in the top of their field, making great videos about everything they know. Me making videos about content creation, doing multiple tasks takes time to get to that point. Anybody new that starts will need to get to that point. So not all my team at that same level as what I am at. So if you work directly with me, you would get a different level of service. If you worked with my team, you wouldn't get as high level of service. Now there's a whole question here now. Does that mean I need to train my people more? There's also that. That can be a thing, but you can only train so much within a time period. Sometimes it takes regular doing of what you're talking about to learn knowledge. So someone that will come into the accountancy business, they might be learning based on like a documented version of education, but then until they do a few tax returns, they get different questions from customers. There's different knowledge that you accumulate as you do your job. So the things I've learned during my 12 years of doing what I'm doing, I've been able to streamline so many things, and I've had like a higher expectation now, which is difficult for someone new to meet, because until you do it, it's very hard. It's like a classic thing when they say, "Oh, join our company," and you need experience. But if you leave in college or school, how will you have experience until you give someone a chance? So there's always be an element of not everybody is at the same level. The people you see on accountancy, this is a roundabout way of me explaining this. Hopefully this makes sense to you. So if you're an accountant and you've seen an accountant who's very good, but then you end up getting a team member, and then you're not getting the same level of service you expected from what you saw, but it's still doing okay. It's getting it done. Is that okay? That's a question you need to ask yourself. But you will get this a lot. People will make, that's a big thing. A lot of people up what they do to offer the services. Sales, isn't it? The salesing to you that, oh yeah, we do this, we do this, we do this. When you actually get them, they don't really do half of that, or if they do, it's an added attachment. You have to pay extra on top to get the extra things that they said they offer, which makes sense. It's like an upgrade. It depends on how their business plan is, basically. So the accountancy firm, do they offer everything as part of a package, or do they treat it like Apple treat it and everything's a bolt-on and you pay extra for this, extra for this, extra for this? So that's something you need to ask them at the start. That will sort that out. So that's, again, going back to my questions you want to ask your accountant. This is a longer version of my podcast because I'm explaining everything to you, but you can get all of this in a bite-sized form if you sign up to my newsletter, zulftalks.com. There'll be a links page there. Click on one of the buttons to join my mailing list, and I'll send you this in one like email, and send you a couple of other useful information. If you're working for yourself, you'll definitely find it useful, because I've cultivated this from, like I said, years of going through the process, finding out, wait a minute, this isn't as easy as people make out to be. But hopefully, once I've explained this to you, you've crossed that hurdle, so you don't have to do any of the research. You can just go straight in and like, okay, you answer these questions, and you can decide, you gave me this answer, my accountant, or let him, he or she, based on my expectations and the money or the charge they're charging me, is that comparable in my area? What is the going rate for accountants? Is he higher or lower than that? Because sometimes if they're charging you too less, that should ring alarm bells as well. Because paying someone £200-300 every year for accountancy, that seems a little bit cheap to me. If they're offering you everything they need to offer you, that should be more like at least $1,200-1,300 pounds. If they're doing like proper stuff, spending time going through everything, questioning you, making sure you make the best use of that. I'm paying double, triple that a year. So there's a whole element of find what works for you. And we'll talk also about if you need to move accountants later on. Is that an option? How do you do that? How easy is it? So stay tuned for that bit. So we covered finding an accountant. How much does an accountant actually cost? So this is going to be regional. It's going to be depending on what you want, but let me give you ballpark figures just so you've got something to think about, because nobody ever gave me a figure. When I called them, they wouldn't really say, oh, we'll have to do an evaluation, blah, 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 blah. You know, come on, mate, just tell me lower end, what is it going to be? Higher end, what is it going to be? So lower end, you're looking at, if you want someone just to do a tax return each year, you can spend anything between £200 to £300 to £400. That's on the lower end. They can probably do the minimum just to go through the paperwork and apply and send it off. If you want them to proofread it, go through and make sure that things are correct, or then you need to get them involved earlier on in your process. You can't just do it once a year. Then that can be something between £1,500 to £2,000. This is based in West Midlands, UK kind of rates. London and those areas might be more expensive. The other side of this will be if you want like a full-on company with payroll, pension contributions, all these things included, then you're going to be going in the higher figures. You can have between 3,000 to 6,000. But then if you have a higher like turnover, more people working in your staff, then this can be unlimited really. You get like 20,000, 30,000 for bigger companies where there's more involved in regular updates of payroll and bookkeeping and all the services that are offered. So the more you have on there, the more it will be costing you. So one of the questions you need to ask them is, what services do you offer? If I grow my company, can you keep up with me, basically, is a question. So that's a rough idea of costs. And we also covered what's included in that cost because there's different services there. Do you get a dedicated accountant? That's a good one. There's a lot of services online. I've seen a few adverts online where they actually offer you like a online accountant, so you can just chat with them and stuff. So that might be an option. I looked at that and I was like, I don't know. I'm not ready yet. I'm not that. When you're new into business, you probably want someone to speak to, which in theory you can do online, but I prefer picking up the phone, calling someone. It depends what you like to do, having a Zoom session, WhatsApp chat, email, all this stuff. Is it available to you? How frequently can you get to them? How quick will they respond to you? What types of questions can you ask them? Sometimes that's something. Accountants have like a specific field of questions that they will be able to answer. So I found a lot of the times the questions I was asking were a bit too advanced for an accountant. So it's more along the lines of having maybe a financial advisor or like someone else who would answer these types of questions. So for example, okay, so I'm planning this year I'll make X amount of profit. Accountant, Mr. Accountant, is there a way I can make that work better for me? So getting your money to work for you, they could probably say, okay, you can be tax efficient, you can pay salaries, you can put some into your pension. They give you like the standard stuff. But if you want advice about, actually, you know what, you should be investing that money into buy-to-let properties, or you should be using that investment to buy a company, buying a property in your company's name and then going through that kind of question. Because I was making quite a lot of profit, I had to find ways of like doing something with the profit of the money. So that meant that I was able to go through a financial advisor, which is different to an accountant. So I learned that, like, that was learning for me, because I thought, well, in accounts, from what I knew, I thought accountant will know everything, but apparently not. So I think about people that if you're passionate about your job, you'll know everything about that area. However, accountancy, it's like they'll do accounts. So I found that a lot, especially in the business world. They got their focus, that's all they do. Outside of that, they don't really do. You'll have to seek other services. Unless you can find someone who does all of those services in one, let me know, because I'll be interested in those. I don't mind paying for it. If you have one person that you can ask everything to, for example, if you ask me about content creation, I can tell you everything I need to know. So where to start, which social medias to use, what happens when you earn money, where to put your money. So I've had to become an accountant, a financial advisor, all of this stuff for myself. I can't offer that to you because I need some type of qualification to teach other people. So remember, this podcast is for information purposes only. I'm sharing what I did, how I did it, and I'm hoping that helps you understand that. So all these things may apply to me and my journey, but yours might be different. If you're not planning to make a profit in the first couple of years of business, then accountants will be very important to make sure you're putting things in the right pot and the finances tie up. So you're spending money, you're in negative equity, you're not got much money to pay for stock. Is there government grants? All these things, accountants can sometimes help with those. So there's a little bit about that. Let me look at what else is on my list, just so I know I covered everything. I had a list set up here for you. Do you get a dedicated accountant? So will you just have a person that you deal with, like a different person every time you call up, or is a dedicated accountant that deals with your actual accounts? How well versed are they on your area of expertise? Do they also look after social media, people that make money from social media, or content creation, or artists? So do they understand the challenges you would face? These are questions you're thinking about. What do they do? Do they do what you want? That's basically that. Is there additional costs involved in terms of software? So will they charge you more money for like QuickBooks subscriptions, any legal fees, any additional things to add payroll on there, any pension contributions, like all these little things? Say, what are the add-ons? What's included in the price? What are the add-ons you need to charge me or that I pay for and extras? And what services are those that can be taken from elsewhere? Do they have to go through the accountant, or can you get your own QuickBooks subscription? Is it cheaper to go through your accountant? These are a few things finding an accountant. So now that's like the overall bit of it. But I'm going to share you my story just so you understand how I got to where I was. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So I did a lot of searching, spoke to lots of people on the phone, Google Podcasts. Well, you can hear me on Google Podcasts, but Google Maps, I searched for local accountants, didn't find anybody half decent, not even quarter decent. Then spoke to a few people online, looked at, when I say online, I'm talking about things like YouTube, podcast episodes, Facebook forums of people that are creating businesses, but everybody there's just promoting themselves. Nobody's actually sharing how they got to where they got to. So that wasn't a great source, the Facebook groups type thing. The main thing was YouTube. I looked for how to get an accountant, accountants in the UK, what to look for in accountants, and most of the time there's about a handful of accountants in the UK that make video content online about doing that. So you can approach them and say, actually, wait a minute, they're making content online, and look at that. So I did that, followed through that. Person that was on the video wasn't the person I ended up getting as an accountant. Somebody in the team was there, and I got a basically package where any questions I have, I can ask. As a new setup, they kind of give you information every year before your tax return. Oh yeah, okay, this is how you, like a review of the year. This is how you did. This is what we would advise you can do. Well, not advise. This is what we suggest you can do. This is what you can do better based on your income for this year. Next year, if you carry on at this rate, maybe do this, which I'll cover more in like later episodes about breaking down how you deal with losses and profits in working for yourself. And again, this is information, just to be fully clear. And yeah, so that's like my journey. Am I happy with my accountants? I've had to learn to become happy with the accountants, because when I originally worked in the finance sector, the accountants, they were top notch, knew what they wanted to do, what the company's levels were, and like I had an expectation. So when I found my, who I ended up going with, so I had to lower my expectations, and like, actually, wait a minute, I'm not a big company like a multi-million-dollar financial company that has top notch accountants, but maybe if I pay extra when I get bigger and I change accountants, that might be an option to make sure it's fully covering what I want. But because I've got the financial background, I do a lot of spreadsheets where I monitor my own stats as well. So I'm quite, I like to do everything. As much as I can do, I like to do. And I like to outsource as minimum as possible. So if something goes wrong, I know what happened, where it's from, why it's gone wrong, or if something needs to change, okay, why are we changing this? Let's do it this way. Okay, looking at I made this assumption here, that wasn't correct, let's do this. So you always need knowledgeable people around you to help you, which is where accountants come in. So make sure you're doing the things in the right way. Read up, do your own research. If you spend a month putting your head into accounts, like the basics, when do you need to do tax returns, what's included in tax returns, trivial benefits, directors' salaries, having employees, pensions, all this stuff. I spent like a day on each of them, learning as much as I could learn, and I ended up knowing more than a lot of normal starters that are starting in business. So the main thing here is, if you've got the time, learn it. If you don't have the time, you're expecting your accountant to know this stuff. But speaking to the 10 accountants I spoke to originally before I ended up with who I've got, half of them didn't know any of this stuff, which I educated myself on in a month. So what's that saying to you? Well, I don't know what's that saying to you. I'm just saying, make sure you get a good accountant and lower your expectations. Because I think coming from my background, I'm expecting more from people. If they're an expert in accountancy, I'm expecting them to be like, on the ball. But if there's some things that they don't know, they'll have to go to the team or find out for you. That's like, okay, well, we can't be expected to know everything. But in most cases, if I'm asked about my field, I'll have an answer for you. Like, literally, like, what camera should I get? Oh, my lighting isn't right. Why isn't it right? I can give you like an answer. Well, based on that, this. But passion, isn't it? If you're passionate about what you do, you'll know more about it. If you're doing it just as a job, it's just a job. Oh yeah, that department deals with that. Computer says no, that thing. But that's a nice round off to this session. Hopefully you found any of that interesting. Let me know if you found that interesting. I can be reached at all the social media places. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode. That's the podcast recorded done. YouTubers, thanks for joining me. This has been a special episode just for you to see me do a podcast. Hopefully the video helps you.